Hello, Math One. So this lesson is on using the angles formed by two parallel lines in a transversal to find the measure of missing angles. Now, you don't have to follow these directions. I'm just going to go ahead and show you what you're doing. But what I did on another tab is I went to a website called GeoGebra and I created two lines. And I have to tell you that this line and this line, right? The ones I'm highlighting, we created those so that those are parallel. Okay, and remember, parallel lines are two lines that never intersect. Okay, so now what we want to do here is once I know the measure of these angles, notice here that's 35, that's 35, and if I continue to measure angles, if I measure this angle here, right, that'll give me an angle measure. There's another angle measure, another angle measure, and I'll clean this up in just a minute. But once you look at this, that angle's 145, that's 35, that's 145, that's 145, that's 35. If I take all of these angles and I look at it, right, notice what we see here. We see a lot of angles that have the same measure. And it's important to understand this. Now, what happens here, okay, is once I have parallel lines, and I'm going to draw this line as parallel as I can, and I'm going to draw my transversal through here like such. So again, we said that this line was parallel to that line, and then we said this angle was 35, 35, 145, 145, 35. So we had the measures of the angles there. So what we had is two parallel lines. So we're going to first say that parallel lines, oh, parallel lines are coplanar lines that never intersect. So when we talk about parallel lines, if I have a line here, a line parallel to it will run right alongside it and they will never intersect. Now the symbol for parallel is this symbol here. And when we have parallel lines, we put an arrow on them or a double arrow, right, to show that those two lines are parallel. So when we mark a diagram, we mark it with arrows on it to say that those two lines are parallel. If I had another set of parallel lines, right, I would put maybe one arrow on those. So the single arrows tell me that those are parallel. The double arrows tell me that those are parallel. So with that in mind, right, once we look at something like this, and I'm just going to use the angle measures we had a minute ago. It's going to be just drawn separately or opposite, but it still works. Okay, when I look at these angle measures here, if I take one pair of corresponding angles, what can I conclude about them? If I take this angle here, what angle corresponds with it? This angle here. Remember, corresponding angles are same side of transversal, right? One exterior, one interior, they don't touch each other. So what do I notice about them? Well, I notice the measure of this angle is 145 and the measure of this angle is 145. So we can say that those angles are congruent. Okay. Now, if I look at alternate interior angles, so I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to get rid of that. If I look at a pair of alternate interior angles, so that one and that one, right? Those are alternate interior angles. What do I notice about their measures? They are the same. And when two angles have the same measure, what do we say? we say they are congruent. If I look at the other pair of alternate interior angles, right? If I look at the other pair, such as this angle and this angle, what do I notice about those? They also have the same measure. So we say alternate interior angles are congruent. Now, the tough one to see is same side interior. If I highlight a pair of same side interior, say this angle here, so we're same sided transversal, both interior, this angle here. Are those angles congruent? No. But what do we notice about them? If I take 145 and I add 35, what would I get? 180. So what would we say about same side interior angles? We would say that these are supplementary. And now, if I look at alternate exterior angles, such as this and this, what can we conclude about those? They are the same measure, and alternate exterior angles will be congruent. And remember, guys, when you look at the diagram, if they look congruent, they are congruent. Okay? Very important to know and understand that. So let's look here. When I look at the first example, determine the angle relationship between the angles and find the measures. Well, here's the thing. If I look, they tell me these lines are parallel. These are alternate exterior angles. What do we say up here about alternate interior angles? They are congruent, which means they have the same measure. So angle 5 would be 65 degrees. Letter B, if I see angle 8 and I see this angle, they are on opposite sides of the transversal and they're both exterior. Alternate exterior, what would those be? Those would be equal. So angle 8 would be 42 degrees. Now, angle 6 for this one. If I take this angle and I take this angle, those are same side interior. What do we know about those? They are supplementary, meaning they add up to 180. So to find angle 6, all I'm going to do is 180 minus 130, and that would give me 50 degrees. Now, for example 2, what they want you to do is find the measure of the angles and then justify your reasoning. Now, I don't know if I made it clear before, but these angle relationships are only congruent or supplementary if the given lines are parallel. If they're not parallel, these angle relationships won't exist. So, when I look here, what type of angles do we see here? Well, if I look at those, same side of transversal, one interior, one exterior, those would be corresponding. So we could say that corresponding angles are congruent. So we say angle 3 is 50 degrees. Now, when they ask for justification, it's basically giving a reason. And we always start and say it the same way. And we're going to say, if lines are parallel, and we can use the parallel symbol, right? Then, what kind of angles did we have? Corresponding. So we say then corresponding angles are congruent. Okay, if I look at letter B, if I'm looking for angle 1, what's the relationship here? If this is my transversal, they're on opposite sides of the transversal. They're both interior. So these are alternate interior angles. What did we say about those? We said they're congruent. So if this is 82 degrees, angle 1 is 82 degrees. And we say it's 82 degrees because if lines are parallel, then alternate interior angles are congruent. Now, when I look at angle 2, though, Notice angle 2 does not have a relationship with parallel lines. If I look, these are just vertical angles. So angle 2 right away is just going to be 82 degrees. And this reason is if vertical angles, then congruent. Okay? And letter C. If I look at letter C and I start with angle 1 and 118 degrees, those are alternate interior angles which are congruent. So angle 1 is 118. And we say if lines are parallel, then alternate interior angles are congruent. If I look at the next one, 118 degrees and angle 2, those are same side interior angles, which means those add up to 180. So we would say angle 2 is 180 minus 118, which is going to be 62 degrees. Okay. Now the next one, if I look here, if I put an arc in this angle here, and I put an arc in this angle here, that helps me identify that this line is my transversal. Those angles are on opposite sides of that transversal, and they're both interior. So we can say that these are alternate interior angles, which makes them congruent. If those are congruent, what we basically do is we take the two measures and we set them equal to each other. 13x minus 5 equals 86. Now I can go ahead and solve for x. Add 5, divide by 13, and x is equal to 7. Now the next one, when I look at these, they're on the same side of that transversal. They're both interior. So we have same side interior angles. So what do we know about these? They are supplementary, meaning they add up to 180. So I'm going to take 6y and 120, add them together, and when I add them together, I get 180. So now I can solve for y. 6y equals 60, divide by 6, y is equal to 10. So knowing what type of angles you have and knowing whether they're congruent or supplementary, right, is the hardest part about this section. Do me a favor, use your notes to help you with student practice and let us know if you have any questions.